So welcome to a different episode of Sawdust. We have gotten tons of comments and tons of questions, so we thought we'd take an opportunity to address some of those questions and answer some of those questions. Probably one of the most common questions I get is how I got started. I'm Jeff Sweenor of Sweenor Builders. We have been building on the coast for over 30 years. Our team of craftsmen and design professionals are committed to delivering the best practices in custom home building. Our end product has to be beautiful, highly efficient, and use advanced building science to stand up to harsh coastal conditions. On Sawdust, we bring you behind the scenes to give you an inside look of how we do it. I got started a little bit by accident. I was 24 at the time. I was finishing up my rowing career and getting ready to become the fourth generation of my family's candy business. I was always relatively handy. We always did a lot of work around the candy store, and I decided to take the summer off and build my own house. My wife and I were engaged, and we were going to buy a lot, and I wanted to build it. So I hired somebody that knew what they were doing, and off I went. And that summer turned out to be the beginning of something new. And I decided at that point I wanted to be a home builder. So when I talk about my journey over 31 years, I use the metaphor ladder. Everything I've really done, everything that I've learned, everything that I've done, I think about rungs on a ladder, and it's always one more rung, one more rung. You know, again, I built my own house, and then I moved on to really start with projects that I knew I was capable of. And, you know, that was what we now call the ladder of success. And that ladder was many rungs, and I just started at the bottom rung and started climbing. And when I started building houses, I started building, you know, small, modest houses that I knew I could handle. And so I would start with a 1,200 square foot ranch, I think was one of the first houses that I built as a project. And interestingly, nobody wants to hire you if you've never built that product before. You know, if you're a builder of a ranch house, then, you know, it's hard to graduate to build a Cape house, let's say. So the way I found a strategy to do that was to build a spec house. And so I used spec houses as stepping stones or rungs of the ladder. And each time I wanted to climb to another level, I would build at that next level. So I was always building a little bit beyond my ability, and, you know, putting everything I had into that process so that I at least appeared capable of building at that level. Spec building is an interesting dynamic. I used it strategically to move to the next level, and not always as a way to make money. In fact, I lost money at more spec houses than I made money. And the reason is that I was always trying to put more into that house than in using it more as a business marketing tool than I was at a way to make money. So historically, I would always overbuild for the market, and, you know, it ended up costing me money in the short term. But in the long term, it has proven to be a valuable resource, because otherwise I would have never gotten to that next level. So you would build a house, and then you would try to show it to as many people as you possibly could, so that they either were an interested customer or they knew of somebody that had some interest. But it just basically use it to spread the word and, take full advantage of it. And don't just take advantage of it at the end of the project when it's done. People have a genuine interest in construction and seeing houses at different stages. And I used to have open houses at the framing stage, so that it gave me the opportunity to talk to people and to demonstrate what we did different, behind the walls. So the stuff that you don't see in a finished house, I could go through, even if it was just real basic. But you find something in every example. You show how tight your header is to your jack stud, or you demonstrate examples of your nailing pattern, or anything that you could do to demonstrate that you were doing something better than the average person or the average builder, was an opportunity for you to market yourself. I mean, early on, it was me and one guy, then maybe me and two guys. At the most, I think it was four of us. And we would build, and I did everything. I wore a tool belt, we framed and did everything. And because I didn't grow up doing it, or I didn't have any prior experience, I always had to make sure that I hired somebody on our crew that knew more than me. And I had to keep doing that. And again, that's climbing the rung. I had to keep hiring people that knew more than me and respect what they brought to the table. And I still do that. 31 years later, I'm never done learning from the people that I have on my team. And it's probably why I'm so team oriented, because, I've gained a position in this market by having the right people. And so I've never really dropped that philosophy. We should come down into the attic. Someone's asking if I hit a few plateaus, and what were they, and how did you get past them? There's a lot of plateaus in the ladder. There's a lot of, can't quite find that next rung. And, there's the path is not very linear. There's a lot of flat spots, and there's even some down spots. How'd I get past them? You can't always control every single thing, but there's some things that you can control no matter what the circumstances. So I refer to that a lot when I talk about how I initially got started and some of the things that I did that I knew I could control. So I'll give you an example. I would always make sure that the job site was completely organized and completely clean, because that was something that I didn't need to know any skill about. I didn't need to know anything about building to have a clean, organized job site. And what I learned is that it's amazing the perception that the public has when they come on a clean and organized job site. It may not look any different to them than another job site, but because it was clean and because it was organized, it always looked better. And so people would comment, this is an incredible looking frame, or an incredible looking, there's always something that is different about it. And it was only that it was clean and it was organized. So it gave you the perception of being better than you were. Another example is being 5 minutes early for everything. Just set your clock so that you're 5 minutes early for every single thing that you do. That's something that doesn't take any skill, doesn't take any experience. It gives you an advantage that you don't even realize that you're getting. If you can show up 5 minutes early, it just shows that you're prepared, that you care about whoever it is that you're meeting, that you're considerate of their time. Other little things, be a good communicator. It's answering your phone or responding to an email, responding to a text. Just be diligent about always getting back to people. I just think it's one more thing that it's a small thing, but it separates you. So there's another question here about, was it hard to finance for a spec build project when you're first starting out? Absolutely. I started out with zero money, zero. And, when I was first learning, I wasn't even able to pay myself for a lot of it. But I got started in spec building by partnering with people. I would find investors that had the wherewithal to build a spec house, but didn't necessarily have the skill set or have the time or desire to actually go through the building project. So I would leverage my sweat equity, my equity, and initially you have to start out taking a smaller slice of the pie, and a lot of times you have to guarantee them a certain return before you got yours. But, it enabled me to, build some houses, build some spec houses, and not have the pressure of trying to, use a bank. And, so there was creative terms where you had some performance incentives, and maybe there was a minimized interest carry along the way, and the interest was paid toward the end so that, it made it manageable. But, that's how I initially got started. And I did that for a long time, is to use other people, use partners for the money portion, until you could develop a portfolio and you had a balance sheet where you were actually financeable, where you were bankable. Then that was probably 15 or 20 years in before I was able to get a bank loan for a construction loan. So keep in mind that, while I'm doing this, I'm building. I'm swinging a hammer every day. So it was either early in the morning before work started or after hours at night. That's when I worked on sort of the administrative end. It was, a long time. I was probably in the field for 15 years before I transitioned to, taking the tool belt off. And I have probably 5 questions about that. When did you take the tool belt off? And it's different for everybody. For me, I probably had the tool belt on longer because I didn't know anything. I didn't start out with experience from framing for somebody else. I was still learning how to build houses, and I was still very motivated to learn to be a better builder and to actually, keep climbing that ladder and build a better house, learning more. Another question, what do I see as some of the pitfalls that I recognize from other builders? I would say that, I see people get into trouble when they get a little bit out over their skis. Economy is good and things are good, and, there's a lot of new trucks, there's a lot of fancy tools, and, my best advice for people would be starting out, stay within your means, and, try not to incur any debt. Try to, certainly with tools, don't incur debt to buy tools. Try to pay your way and stay current so that when, some of the work might dry up, you have some dry spots that you're not going backwards. It's really painful when you get ahead of yourself. And I've been there. I remember, trying to skip a rung on the ladder, and I overbuilt, and I had 2 spec houses going. And, again, you get carried away, you get consumed in it. And, I had 2 houses sitting, and, they were great marketing, but, they hurt a lot, and I went backwards. It was a very painful lesson. It took me years to recover. I ended up owing the bank money. I had to, borrow money to pay a bank loan. It's tough when you go to a closing and you're selling a piece of property and you have to bring your checkbook. But those are the lessons that I've learned, and that's my advice to people starting out. Being a home builder, there's always this ebb and flow of workload, and I constantly am saying to myself, how am I going to keep all these guys busy on one day, and the next day, how am I going to finish all this work with the guys that I have? So, we have about 40 people in the field, and it's sometimes hard to know when you need more, and sometimes to know when you have too many. It's a constant pressure, constantly analyzing the workload that you have, knowing when to ramp up, knowing when to contract. But it comes with experience. The experience teaches you that, they'll be, trying to forecast out, try to do long range planning so that you know what's coming and who can handle it. And I would say that I would venture on staying a little bit lean and work longer hours than, getting too many people and increasing your overhead too much, and then having to, tell people to go home, or having to lay people off, or what have you. I would always think that it's better to be on the edge of having too much work and not enough people, and just working more hours to make it work, rather than hiring too many people and having people with nothing to do or not enough to do. One of the things that I've done over 30 years that I would encourage anyone starting is look for opportunities to create other income streams. If I tell younger guys a lot, if you try to buy a rental property, if you tried to buy one a year for 20 years, at the end of that 20 years, your first one would be paid off and you got 20 properties. So I've been fortunate that I started with small things, but have always kept a hand in building a portfolio of properties. And I have, some commercial property that now is supporting rental income, and that helps during the downturn. And what's nice about being in the building business is that it enables you to provide some sweat equity, to contribute some sweat equity to the project. And that sweat equity, you can't take it out to dinner, but you can invest it into a project so that it's, that much less capital that you have to put in to get that property, or to stabilize that property, whatever the case might be. I remember a guy that was a little older than me that had a bunch of experience. He was actually an excavator, and he was a good mentor. And he said to me, "Just make sure you keep your name clean." And it sounds simple, but it was really an important thing that I've always remembered. And what that means is, bad news travels a lot faster than good news. And if you have a bad experience with a client, you have a disagreement, an unhappy client, try to do whatever you can to walk away with a happy client, because the happy clients they'll talk about you, but not nearly as much as an unhappy client will. It can sometimes cost you money, and it often does. You're always, sometimes you have to give something back. Sometimes you have to come back and fix something, and you may not like it, and you may not agree with it. But you have to remember that the client may not always be right, but they'll always be the client. And that's who you have to satisfy. You have to always be thinking about your reputation and about that referral, and you have to carry that torch every day, every year, because it's cumulative. And you have to be able to step back and to say, okay, how much is this really going to cost me? What are the true dollars here? And whether it's redoing some tile work or paint or some finish work, whatever it is, you really have to evaluate what it is that you need to fix or make good on. How much is it really going to cost me? And what is the potential cost of looking the other way? What is the potential cost of pushing back and not honoring their wishes? And, my feeling is that it's invaluable, and that any one of those opportunities will, they'll haunt you if you don't always do the right thing. And sometimes doing the right thing may not seem like the right thing at that time, but it's the right thing for your future and the future of your business. What Sweenor Builders looks like today after 31 years, we're almost 50 people. We have a whole layer of management. We have a CFO, a marketing director, office manager, and then project managers, site superintendents. We have cabinet makers, lead carpenters, and then a whole bunch of carpenters. We have interior designers and also architectural design. So we're really a full-service home builder that not only designs some of the projects, but we actually build from in-house staff. So we self-perform all of our own carpentry, our framing, our exterior trim, our siding, all of our finished carpentry, and our cabinetry. So there's a lot of questions. I answered a bunch of them. There's a lot more that I didn't get to. We can keep this going. So continue to send in your questions, and I'll try to keep it to the common themes that I see a bunch of different people asking. But keep them rolling. We'll get them answered. So thanks for watching our 10th episode of Sawdust. So that's a wrap for season 1. We're going to take a little break to get our stories lined up for season number 2. So stay tuned, subscribe to our channel alerts, and follow us on Instagram. So we'll see you next season on Sawdust.